Hey everyone, and welcome right back to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we are diving into a seriously fascinating Supreme Court case, Gutierrez versus People. If you've ever wondered exactly where the law draws the line between a government official just being, strictly cautious and an official actually breaking the law, well, this is your perfect case study. Today, we're going to meticulously break down the anatomy of a graft conviction and really unpack the specific legal doctrines that ultimately sealed a town mayor's fate. So let's just jump right in.
Here is our legal roadmap for today. We'll start with the unpaid gratuity pay, then break down the graft charge elements, dive into the doctrine of bad faith, define undue injury, and finally wrap up with a final verdict. I'd love for you to keep this one question in the back of your mind as we go through the details today. When does a mayor's quote-unquote caution actually cross the line and become a crime? I mean, obviously in government, we absolutely want our leaders to be careful with public funds. That's their job, right? But what happens when that supposed prudence turns into a malicious delay? That right there is the exact tension at the heart of this entire case.
All right, moving into Section 1, the unpaid gratuity pay, and a staggering 25-year delay.
Let's look at how this actually played out. Back in April 1996, the former mayor of Tiwi, Albay, Naomi Corral, sadly passed away. Naturally, her grieving husband, Dr. Corral, applied for her gratuity pay. By August of 1996, the Government Service Insurance System, the GSIS, officially approved the claim. So the funds were there and ready to go. But then, the newly elected mayor, Patria Gutierrez, stepped in. In February 1997, she explicitly ordered this gratuity pay deleted from the municipal budget, claiming she was just investigating some anomalies in the treasurer's office. What followed was a mind-boggling 25-year legal battle, which only just ended with the Supreme Court's decision in October 2021. 25 years of waiting for funds approved. Think about that for a second. That is a quarter of a century just to release a check that had already been cleared. Section 2. The graft charge elements under RA number 3019. So, Mayor Gutierrez was charged under Section 3E of the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. Now, the crucial thing to remember about this doctrine is that the prosecution must prove 3 strict elements beyond a reasonable doubt to secure a conviction. First up, the accused must be a public officer. That's undisputed here. She was obviously the mayor. Second, they must have acted with manifest partiality, evident bad faith, or gross inexcusable negligence. And third, this action must have actually caused undue injury to any party. Essentially, these 3 elements formed a highly strict checklist that the Supreme Court used to evaluate her fate. Which brings us to Section 3, the doctrine of bad faith, or prudence versus malice.
So how does the Supreme Court actually define evident bad faith? Well, it requires far more than just bad judgment or making a simple mistake. It requires a palpably and patently fraudulent and dishonest purpose. The legal doctrine here talks about things like moral obliquity, conscious wrongdoing, and a furtive design. Basically, the court is looking for a state of mind that affirmatively operates with some ulterior motive or ill will. Mayor Gutierrez claimed she was literally just being cautious about municipal funds. The court had to decide if her actions fit this incredibly severe definition instead.
Now, just to really round out your legal understanding of Section 3E, the law does provide 2 other modes of committing this offense. Manifest partiality means having a clear, notorious inclination to favor one person over another. Gross inexcusable negligence, on the other hand, is acting without even the slightest care, a conscious indifference to consequences. But for Mayor Gutierrez, the Sandigan ban and the Supreme Court zeroed in specifically on the doctrine of evident bad faith. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because the Supreme Court systematically dismantled the mayor's defense using her very own factual logic. The mayor argued that she was merely protecting the town from a municipal treasurer who allegedly had unliquidated cash advances. But let's look at reality. The late Mayor Corral already had her municipal clearances issued, the GSIS had already completely approved the claim, and the budget was already allocated. The Supreme Court rightly pointed out that Mayor Gutierrez could have easily pursued her administrative cases against the treasurer without holding Dr. Corral's legally approved money hostage. I really want you to focus on the phrase meandering strategy here. The court found that she went to incredible lengths, ordering the budget deleted, completely ignoring COA audit reports, filing multiple complaints against the treasurer that were ultimately dismissed, all just to delay this one specific payment. This meandering strategy was the ultimate proof that her actions crossed the line from administrative caution straight into a dishonest purpose and sinister motivation. This was the exact proof of evident bad faith the doctrine requires. All right, Section 4, defining undue injury and actual damages. Under the doctrine applied in Section 3E cases, undue injury is strictly equated with the civil law concept of actual damage. You know, you can't just walk into a courtroom and say, hey, the government hurt my feelings. The injury absolutely cannot be presumed. It has to be specified, quantified, and proven to the point of moral certainty. The prosecution essentially had to prove an exact, measurable harm that was caused by the mayor's bad faith.
And the facts of the specific case brilliantly illustrate that exact requirement. We're not talking about some abstract legal theory here. The undue injury was precisely 352,456 pesos and 11 centavos. This was the specific, quantified amount that was withheld from a grieving family for a quarter of a century. Because this number was definitively proven, that final element of the graft charge was perfectly satisfied.
Finally, Section 5, the final verdict, procedural rules, and finality. Before handing down the final word, the Supreme Court highlighted a really vital procedural doctrine, citing the Zapata case. Basically, when you appeal a Sandiganbayan conviction up to the Supreme Court under Rule 45, you can only raise questions of law. The Supreme Court is not a trial court. They do not reweigh the evidence. Mayor Gutierrez's appeal essentially asked the court to reinterpret the facts to show she wasn't acting in bad faith. But because her arguments didn't fall under any strict legal exceptions, the Sandiganbayan's factual finding of her guilt was deemed absolutely conclusive.
So, with all the elements of Republic Act No. 3019 proven beyond a reasonable doubt and the procedural rules strictly applied, the Supreme Court officially denied the mayor's petition and affirmed her conviction. The consequences of crossing that line from prudence to malice are incredibly severe. For withholding the gratuity pay in evident bad faith, Mayor Gutierrez was sentenced to a minimum of 6 years and 1 month, up to a maximum of over 9 years in prison. Furthermore, she faces perpetual disqualification from ever holding public office again. It's a completely life-altering penalty for a meandering strategy of delay.
So I want to leave you with this final thought today. Public officers absolutely have a sworn duty to protect government funds, but as this case strictly defines through its core doctrines, that duty can never, ever be used as a weapon. Does the pursuit of administrative cleansing ever justify trampling on an individual's clear legal rights? The Supreme Court gave us a resounding no. Thank you all so much for joining me to break down these crucial legal doctrines today and keep seeking that focused understanding.